He's Shaka Fool.
What?
He's Shaka Fool.
What?
Instead of losing weight, get a small shirt.
Oh, what was that?
Understands this is a team.
Son of a
Bitch! George spinning in the lane, surrounded, kick out. McCollum fires.
Carrington looks to get it in over Vooch. Running out of time. Got it to George. George almost got stripped. He's down. He throws it away. Out of bounds. Bulls ball.
When looking at the NBA in the 21st century, one thing that's been true the entire century is the Eastern Conference compared to the West is the far inferior conference in almost every way. And of course, the past decade has a very infamous nickname of the Eastern Conference.
It's funny because it's true.
Looking at teams in the East, if they had a bad 3-week stretch, a bad month, come playoff time, doesn't really matter. If you're in the Western Conference, you have a bad week, a bad 2 weeks, you can go from the 3rd seed all the way to the 10th seed just like that. The Western Conference, it was cutthroat and competitive start to finish. The Eastern Conference, you could load manage, take time off, really coast for half the year. And looking at some seasons in the Western Conference, the 8-seeded team had 50 wins, whereas in the Eastern Conference, one of the top 2 teams were the exact same record. That disparity right there, East versus West, has been in reality basketball for my entire life. And looking at the championship teams this century, out of the Western Conference, 17 champions. In the Eastern Conference, only 9. Now look at MVPs this century. In the Eastern Conference, only 9, and from the West, 17. After this year, it'll pretty easily be 18, double the Eastern Conference.
Pathetic.
If you want to talk the best players in the NBA, the best teams in the NBA, the past 25 years of Western Conference has had more great players and more great teams. And look at these numbers, first team All-NBA players by decade. This trend is pretty startling. In the 2000s, the Western Conference had 31 players, compared to the East, who only had 14. The 2010s, the exact same story. The Western Conference had 30, the East only 15. In the 2020s, the gap has narrowed for the Western Conference, still a pretty big lead, as right now in the West, 18 first-team All-NBA players, in the East, only 12.
Some things never change.
That right there is 3 different eras, the 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s, where the Western Conference is the far better conference. And looking at 2026, the exact same trend. Right now, looking at the best players in the NBA, best players in the world. Out of the top 5, the only guy from the Eastern Conference is Giannis. And out of the top 10, it's basically him and Jalen Brunson, if you say Brunson is a top 10 player. Right now, the East versus Western Conference, in terms of quality teams, quality players, MVP players, it's almost 3-1, sometimes even 4-1. And speaking of those teams, look at the Western Conference right now. Teams on pace for 60 wins, you have the Thunder, who might get 70, the Lakers, Rockets, Spurs, and Nuggets. That right there in the Western Conference is 5 quality teams who have very high playoff expectations. Looking at the Eastern Conference, the top 2 teams is Detroit and Toronto. Yes, 2 good teams, 2 good stories. But in terms of winning a championship, competing for a title, those teams aren't there yet.
Much to learn, you still have.
For teams like Toronto and Detroit, who aren't championship teams, why they're the top 2 teams in the Eastern Conference is pretty simple. Yes, the East does suck, that's one factor, but more than that, those 2 teams have guys who play hard, aren't injured, and are very, very consistent. If you have those factors right there, of being consistent, reliable, and not being injured, in the Eastern Conference, you be a top 5 team. Now, looking past the best teams in each conference, the East versus the West, now let's look at the worst teams, specifically the worst teams in the East. As right now in this conference, you have 3 separate teams who are all vying to lose 65 to 70 games. First up, the Washington Wizards. This team right now is absolutely pitiful. And compared to the past 25 seasons, the second worst win percentage was the Charlotte Bobcats in 2012. The Indiana Pacers, the 5th worst, and the Brooklyn Nets, the 8th lowest win percentage of this century. That right there is absolutely abysmal from 3 teams all in the same conference.
Now, this is very shoddy work, Pinkman. I'm actually embarrassed for you.
For teams like Indiana and Brooklyn, very clearly packed it in and called it quits in the 2026 season, as of right now, sleepwalking through the year with piss-poor lineups and very questionable coaching. But looking past those teams, the definitive worst team in the NBA, maybe worst team of the century, we have the Wizards. This team right now, their margin of victory or margin of loss is at negative 15.7. That right now in the NBA is the worst by a country mile. But looking at teams this century, also the worst, ahead of that 2012 Bobcats team, which to most fans is the worst team ever assembled. Now look at defensive rating. Compared to teams this century, dead last, the worst of the worst. And SRS, simple rating system, also the worst on the Bobcats from 2012.
Tristan Vukcevic is on a two-way contract.
The volley with 4 on the shot clock. Got to get something up being guarded by Pirtle.
They're at 34 tonight. Deep three.
What's no? You stink.
Now, when speaking of that infamous Bobcats team that won 7 games, yes, they sucked, were a terrible team. We're looking at that conference where you had some really bad teams, you can have historically bad teams, all playing at the exact same time. In this year's East, you have 3 of the top 10 worst teams of the past century, that being Washington, Brooklyn, as well as Indiana. For this year's Eastern Conference, that's the one thing that makes it very, very special. Not just one all-time bad team, but 3 all-time bad teams in the exact same conference in the same season.
We saw the same type of action, and we had that on our Libero vision with Luke Cornett getting an easy layup against.
It's a 15-1 run by the Nets.
Uses his body, throws it right into the defense. Oh boy!
Devin the steal. Devin.
Turn it off!
Now, once again, looking at the best in the Eastern Conference compared to the West, it's a very unfair comparison. The Knicks, a nice story. Cleveland, fun to watch. And the Pistons, they are electric. When it comes down to it, if you put those teams in the West, they're in that 5 to 6 seed range, where they're a really good team, but on a top-tier, upper echelon team. Case in point, look at Minnesota. This team in the West is kind of an afterthought. Put them in the Eastern Conference, they're a top 2 seed at minimum, and in my view, the best team in the East, and a clear-cut Eastern Conference favorite. What this kind of reminds me of is 07 East versus 07 West. As look at the best teams on the entire NBA, 5 of the 6 came from the West. That year in the NBA, no doubt in anyone's mind, the champion was coming from the West. The Eastern Conference teams, a nice story, nice run, you made the finals, pat on the back. But the best teams in the NBA that year were the Spurs, Suns, and Dallas Mavericks, with the Rockets as a distant 4.
Well, duh.
When you have that overall gap in talent, gap in great teams, it really makes you wonder, is the East versus West model kind of outdated? And here's some more context. Looking at last year's Eastern Conference champion, that of course was the Pacers. This year, who are they down? Their superstar, Tyrese Halliburton. Looking back at 2024, the NBA champions. Jason Tatum last year, down with an Achilles injury. So that right there is the past 2 Eastern Conference champions down with year-long injuries. Then look at Milwaukee. Giannis, the best player in the Eastern Conference, down his co-star Dame Lillard, who also tore his Achilles and then got traded.
Man, it just keeps getting worse and worse, doesn't it?
That added context right there for the Eastern Conference makes things 10 times worse. As teams like Indy and Boston, if they had Halliburton and Tatum, no doubt would be contending and be top teams in the conference. With those guys hurt, as 2 of the top 5 teams in the East taken off the board just like that. So that right there is in the video, and it's quite simple. The Eastern Conference, it sucks, it's a laughingstock, and it's been that for the past 25 years. The Western Conference has the best teams, storylines, coaches, really the best everything. If you want to watch quality basketball, championship basketball, watch the West. If you don't want to watch that, watch teams from the East. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.